So I wanted to ask about mindfulness of breathing and how that should be done. We can read the sutta over and over again and try and follow some sort of method, step by step. I'll breathe in, then I'll breathe out. I'll breathe in, thinking about my body.
I attend to this, I attend to that, I do this, I do that.
And you can actually run through all those steps, forwards, backwards, whatever you want.
And still not do the mindfulness of breathing.
Yeah, so what are you supposed to do?
Well, as the name itself says, it's mindfulness. It's mindfulness of breathing. So in order to do mindfulness of breathing, you need to know what mindfulness is.
Okay, what is mindfulness?
Yeah. So mindfulness, as we spoke in other talks, if mindfulness is done rightly, it's effortless. So mindfulness is not something you can do. Mindfulness is something you discern on account of the presently enduring things, experience as a whole, feelings, body, there are many different ways you can establish mindfulness, but principle of mindfulness is the same, it's to be discerned. So what is it that you discern in order to become mindful? Well, for example, you discern your presently enduring situation. So you have an option, you can be absorbed with the presently enduring situation, something can take away 100% of your attention. You're dealing with this problem or looking at this or doing that. But including self-awareness into whatever you're doing, that's already like a step closer to the proper mindfulness. And that's not something you can do, it's more like an attitude that you can have in regard to things you do. That's why fundamentally a meditation method is inherently wrong from the point of view of mindfulness. Because you can't be doing the mindfulness, yet as the Buddha said, meditation is nothing other than unshakable, imperturbable establishment of mindfulness. So if you're not doing mindfulness from the start, how can you magically establish it through something you do, some methods or repetitions? So it's a recognition of your situation while at the same time, simultaneously with that recognition, you are in the situation. In other words, I'm sitting on the chair now, and with like a corner of your eye, with the back of your mind, you're aware of that. That doesn't mean I need to stand up or lay down or start walking in order to know that I was seated on the chair. That's why the fundamental, like the bodily postures or just awareness of the body. So mindfulness done properly means basically awareness of your situation, be it whether it's kind of established upon the body or feelings or the states of mind, the moods, means it's established in that background. So you're not attending it. I don't have to keep sitting here, I'm seated, I'm seated, I'm seated. I don't need to keep repeating that to myself. Why? Because I already know that I'm seated, even if I don't think about it. So if you were to ask me, what's your body posture? I'll immediately say, I'm seated. And that's what you want to tap into, so to speak. Proper development of mindfulness is tapping into what you already know. It's not doing what you think you must be doing. Oh, I'm seated, I'm feeling the chair, my back, my legs are folded, I'm feeling the floor. That's all result of you already knowing that you are seated. That's not your sitting. In other words, whether you're attending to your feet and your back and whatever else going on while you're seated, that's secondary to the fact that you're already seated and you already know that. So instead of like giving into that, oh, I'm doing this, almost like basically exercising your sense of control over your meditation technique, you want to recognize that, wait a minute, I already know what I'm doing. And then just try not to forget that little bit, that 1%, that 1 grain. Don't forget what you already know. Which means you don't need active effort of reminding yourself that you're seated, that you're seated, that you're seated. All you need to do is just keep a corner of your eye on the fact that you already know that you're seated. And how do you know? Because you are seated. So that knowledge doesn't come from you. It's just a recognition of how things are. That's why through that mindfulness you learn how to discern how things are. That's why that type of mindfulness would result in discerning impermanence, suffering, lack of control, all of that. But it won't result if you do it on your own terms, which is, this is what I'm doing, this is my meditation, I'm touching, feeling, sitting. That's you basically doing what you think you should be doing. But the fact is, Putujan already starts with the wrong view, which means whatever he thinks he should be doing, he will be doing it with the wrong view. That's why you can't have too much of mindfulness either, because it's not doing. It's the recognition of what you already know, and that knowledge is not on you. Same in regard to body postures or in regard to the presently enduring feeling. Again, that's something you already know. So if I ask you, how do you feel? You might think about how you feel in this particular regard or that particular, but if I ask you, how do you feel overall? Is it okay? How's your mood generally? You'll immediately know whether it's sort of plus or minus, so to speak. Whether it's okay, whether it isn't okay. Whether it's neither. So it's tapping into what you already know, and you already know it because it's present on its own terms. Feeling is there enduring, whichever it is. And it's because of you not keeping a corner of your eye on what you already know, that's why you get sort of distracted, pulled with sensuality, ill will, reacting, causing more trouble for yourself, all these things. That's why people are afraid to be alone as well, because they depend on something to take away their attention, to have something to attend to, including a meditation technique or this or this or this, and they don't stay with what they already know because it's frightening. Initially, at least. If you were to just not do anything, including your meditation technique, like the pressure is going to start building up. Solitude, not doing anything. Like doing is required for the maintenance of your being. That's why many people depend on activity of all sorts. Yeah, you can have a good activity, bad activity, less bad activity, but overall you depend on the activity. So mindfulness is not an activity. That's why you can't have too much of it, and that's why you can actually develop wisdom on account of it if you start discerning it rightly. And that's why you need to know what mindfulness is in order to do it rightly. Not just, okay, I'm mindful now. Yeah, you can't start perfectly, you can't start rightly from the beginning, but you can certainly arrive at it if you don't take for granted what you think mindfulness is as mindfulness. That if I were to know what mindfulness is, I would have at least the right view. I would be at least a Sotapanna. So if I'm not Sotapanna, it means I don't quite know what mindfulness is. So whatever I think mindfulness is, I must upgrade. Through that, I must discern it further. Either way, it's a win-win. If you already know what mindfulness is, great. Doing more of it cannot bring any harm. If you don't know what mindfulness is, and then you end up doing more and you understand what mindfulness is, you win again. So you have nothing to lose by regarding yourself as not knowing quite what mindfulness is. And because of that, pushing further. Well, the only thing you have to lose is your vanity and conceit that made you believe you already understood and know and it's already helpful and it already works. Because if it does, you wouldn't have a problem upgrading it or pushing it further. Because if it truly works, it will stand that test. Nothing will happen to it. But the fact that some people might be defending their meditation technique or something and get very touchy over it, or over their practice of mindfulness, means there's passion invested in it, literally. There is conceit and vanity invested in it. And that's not mindfulness then. So, now that we clarify what mindfulness is, mindfulness of breathing. So you can do the breathing, but you can't do the mindfulness in mindfulness of breathing. So in other words, saying mindfulness of breathing means knowledge of breathing. Knowledge of the act of breathing. And that's what the Buddha says in that sutta. Knowingly he breathes in, knowingly he breathes out. That's what his mindfulness is. It's on that level of that discernment of what's already there. So in other words, you can be mindful of the body posture, or you want to be mindful of something less static. Let's put it that way. You want to be mindful of an activity, of something you do. So what is the neutral activity that your body does, whether you want it or not? It's breathing in, breathing out. So you want to be aware of the background of your act of breathing in and breathing out. In other words, you don't want to be attending to your breath directly. You want to make it sort of become a background of whatever your mind's thinking. So you're mindful of breathing. Or you can even bring it to the foreground if you want. But again, not in a sense of, I'm perceiving my breath, I'm being nostrils. No, it still has to be on the level of that knowledge. Because if I ask you now, are you breathing? You will know that you are. And you don't have to stop breathing in order to give me the answer. No, do you need to wait a minute? You can't even doubt it. So you don't have to stop breathing to give me the answer. You can't even doubt whether you're breathing or not. So you already know that you're breathing. So that's what you want to learn through the mindfulness of breathing. Recognition of what you already know. And that's not something you always have to maintain or even can maintain 100% if I'm breathing. No. Let it drift away without losing the sight of it. So here I am, sitting semi-comfortably, not too comfortably because you'll fall asleep, wide awake, eyes open, and you're breathing. And now you know that you are breathing. That's it. What do I do next? Nothing. You do that. So there is the in-breath, there is the out-breath, there is the in-breath, there is the out-breath. Either way, they all stand within that knowledge of I am breathing. Whether it's a particular in-breath or particular, the knowledge of breathing remains the same. That's why then the Buddha would say, he would breathe in like this, or short breath, or long breath, or like this breath, or like that breath. Point being, the knowledge of that breathing still stays the same. Mindfulness gets established, regardless of the type of breath, or how different it is. And it's the same principle. Mindfulness is the same principle. Like the mindful of the body. When the Buddha would say he's mindful of the body like this, mindful of standing, or he's mindful to the extent necessary for final knowledge that body is there. As in, the ultimate background of any of your activity is the background of your body being present there as a basis on account of which you can do all these activities and engagements, feel feelings, perceive perceptions, and so on. So if your mind never forgets that 0.01% what it already knows of that body being a necessary basis for it, your mind cannot give rise to avidya. Whether you recognize it at that time or not doesn't matter. You're doing it rightly. If you're doing it rightly, the time will come when you've done it rightly sufficiently that you recognize what you've been doing rightly. That's also another reason why nobody can accidentally stumble upon the right view. It takes repetition of something you took either through like intellectual discernment or on faith, but you've been doing it rightly, you do it rightly sufficiently, then you recognize right as right, which is the basic definition of Sotapanna. He knows kusala as kusala and akusala as akusala. But he wouldn't have arrived at it if he hadn't been doing it rightly on account of utterance of another and his own faith in it, and rightly understanding it on an intellectual level. So mindfulness of breathing, same principle of mindfulness. Breathing is there, whether it's a short breath, long breath, quick breath, slow breath, breathing is there. And that's what you know. So in a way, breathing is doing, but knowledge of the breathing is not the doing. So why would the Buddha then say doing? Because, sometimes you want to do something. You want to replace coarse doing with refined doing. You want to replace unwholesome doing with wholesome doing. And breathing, being the most neutral type of doing, is the wholesomest doing you can do. Because it's just neutral. Doesn't harm anyone, doesn't harm you, doesn't harm others. So you can develop mindfulness, you can develop knowledge of that neutral type of doing. And it's also repetitive doing, which means it doesn't require your attention as if like solving a task or doing some like menial work or whatever. No, it's just breathing. It happens whether you think about it or not. So you want to discern it on the level of doing, but discern it, not do it yourself. So how do you do that? Start breathing. Secluded, alone. Ask yourself, am I breathing right now? Yes. That's already an increment of that right direction of that knowledge. So you already know you're breathing. Are you still breathing? Yes. So you still know you're breathing. Still the same breathing, same knowledge. Yeah. So you have same thing enduring now. Now you don't even have to go as to ask yourself whether you're breathing. You just remind yourself what you already know. Yeah, you are still breathing. So you can stop saying still. You can stop saying still. You can just say, yeah, I'm breathing. Don't even have to say it. You can think it. When you become familiar with that, as in right now, I'm still breathing. You can then look within that. Oh, the breath is quite slow right now. And you already know that. So you're not doing it, you're discerning it, what's being done. Well, you can do it, But you realize that you yourself doing it is secondary to discernment of what's being done. And that's incidentally how you also overcome the nature of action, how you disown it. But let's not complicate things here. Are you still breathing? You are. All this time you had the same mindfulness of the same breathing. Yeah, particularly the breath kept going in, kept going out. Overall, breathing is there. Body sits, body stands up, body goes, body lays down, body is there. That's why Anapanasati results in the four foundations of mindfulness being brought to fulfillment, as the Buddha said. It doesn't result in mystical experiences of meditative lights and whatnot. It results in clarity of mindfulness. Clarity of mindfulness results in the four right strivings in noble, in the enlightenment factors, and that's it. No other work for you to be done. Why? Because you brought that knowledge of the nature of things to fulfillment.
To the fore.
Well, yeah. So, like bringing mindfulness of breathing to the fore means, okay, am I breathing now? Yeah. Okay. Am I still aware that I'm breathing now? Yes. How am I breathing now? Medium pace, you can call it. You can designate it. There is no right answer to it. There's only right direction or wrong direction. As in, there is only knowledge of it or no knowledge of it. Oh, by the way, how am I feeling while I'm breathing right now? Overall, fundamentally pleasant. But am I still breathing? Yeah. So mindfulness is still concerned, for the lack of a better word, anchored, for the lack of a better word, in the act of breathing. What are the thoughts that keep popping up in my mind while I'm breathing? Same mindfulness, same knowledge of the same breathing. Well, there are thoughts, maybe I'm thinking, how long can I do this? Or what do I do next? Okay, so are those thoughts pleasant or unpleasant while I'm breathing this? Like, I didn't stop breathing while I'm thinking all of this. It's just I haven't lost the sight as the basis of all these things. Well, I'm feeling maybe like doubtful or whatever people might feel. Whatever you discover, as I said, there is no right answer. There is only losing the sight of your breathing or non losing the sight of your breathing. Then, whatever, mind stop thinking about it. What is the state of my mind while I'm breathing this? Am I depressed? Am I elated? Am I happy? Am I sad? What is my mood while I'm breathing in, breathing out all this time? And there you go. You don't need to do anything else when it comes to mindfulness of breathing. Just keep doing that. Because you'll be developing mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, and mindfulness of the thoughts, which is Satipatthanas. Which is why Anapanasati Sutta says that. Fulfillment of Anapanasati brings the fulfillment of Satipatthanas. Nothing else.
It also says that you get rid of distracting thoughts.
Exactly, because they are all rooted in losing the sight of that peripheral, in losing mindfulness basically. Not being anchored in the recognition of what's peripherally enduring.
The background.
Exactly, that's last aversion. That is a necessary basis for last aversion and distraction to arise. Losing the sight of what you already know. That certain feelings, body, tensions, perceptions are enduring there on their own in that background. And you actively choose to ignore them. Hence, that's why everybody is fully responsible for the greed, aversion, delusion. It's not accidental. It's maintained through your consciously, basically made decisions. Not that you fully understand the decisions you're making, but you are doing it. You choose to go down the sensuality. You choose to go down the ill will. You choose to not say no to those things, including distraction. That's why the one who understands that, all he needs to do is stop delighting in it. He doesn't stop thinking sensual thoughts or bad thoughts, but he stops delighting in them. That's how you stop thinking them. Not by preventing them from arising, but by not fueling them further. And mindfulness of breathing is like, see, if you're just mindful, I'm seated, you're not doing anything. So you could fall asleep or you could get easily distracted. But breathing is something that's kind of done, which means it's more active. Yet at the same time, the principle of mindfulness is not compromised because it doesn't really take away your attention. So on the basis of knowing that breathing is there, you can discern what kind of breathing is there. On the basis of knowing that breathing is there, you can discern what feelings are there. On the basis of knowing the breathing is there, you can discern what mood is there. On the basis of knowing what breathing is there, you can discern what exactly is your mind thinking right now. Particular thoughts, or these thoughts, or that thoughts. So on the basis of doing things, you're discerning what's present. You develop that means even less and less chances of being distracted, even when you're not practicing actively, whatever, any meditation. Whether you're sweeping leaves, going, walking, sitting, extending, that mindfulness pertains to it. Because again, you don't necessarily have to think, I'm breathing, because you already know you're breathing. So you just learn basically how to tap into that point of view of that breathing being already there, of that body being already there, which automatically is something that is not your point of view, because you are not doing it.
So it comes before your point of view? Or
Well, it becomes before your appropriation of the point of view through action. As in, I'm looking at this, I'm doing this, that's my point of view. But the only reason you're able to do that is because these things are there on their own, enduring already. Body is there, feelings are there, perceptions are there, intentions are there, pretty much. So again, also all this, there are no steps to mindfulness of breathing. There is mindfulness of breathing, and different aspects of it, of the same principle of mindfulness of breathing. So I'm breathing, I'm still breathing. Still the same mindfulness then, all this time, since we've been talking about it. Yeah, lots of things have changed on a particular level. New thoughts, new moods, new feelings, yet that breathing is still the same. Mindfulness, knowledge of that same breathing is still there.
That breathing is the nutriment, to say.
It's a basis, it's like a reference point, it's an anchor, it's a background basically of everything else more particular.
And one could see that eventually at least, that's without...
Well, there is no end game, there is no like, and then this happens.
Yeah.
If you just keep doing that, what's going to happen is everything inferior to it, everything more particular to it, it's going to be purified of greed, aversion, delusion. It's going to be purified of the basis of non-mindfulness. Why? Because you're developing basis of mindfulness. So you're removing, through doing it, you're removing the nutriment for all the unwholesome things you've been doing and deciding to do. Mindfulness of breathing is on the level of mindfulness of death, or any other mindfulness. That's why the Buddha taught it as a replacement to Marananusati. He said, okay, instead of that, because some monks couldn't quite handle it, practice this. But it's the same goal, as in, stick basically with the most fundamental discernment of things not being in your control, being already there, enduring despite whether you want them or not, whether you do them or not. It is a death of your sense of self. Death of your activity. You are the one who maintains them, you are the one who is in control. That sense just gets completely pushed out, fades away.
So you went into mindfulness of death there. Maybe you can, how is that done? Where is the death that you're mindful of?
Oh, well, again, start with mindfulness of the body. You start seeing the body as a necessary, organic, literally made out of organs, thing in the world there, because of which you experience the world and everything else in it. All your happiness and sadness and choices and decisions are inconceivable if the body is still not there, simultaneously present and living. Do you have any say in that? That body that you find there, that you were given, certain height, certain complexion, whatever, can you make it not age? Can you prevent it from getting sick? Can you ultimately command to it to never die? So those are the first three basic things that people don't dwell on. That's why we say people are intoxicated with life, intoxicated with youth, intoxicated with health. You choose to become intoxicated by refusing to look at the obvious characteristics of it because they are unpleasant. They fill you with anxiety.
So it's that inevitable possibility of death.
Yeah, so once you start recognizing that presence of the body, it's just a necessary nutriment for your experience as a whole of any kind, you stop being concerned with the particulars of that experience. Oh, this bothers me, this makes me happy. You realize that its fundamental nature is undermined by the gratuitous presence of the living body. And when that changes, none of it can remain standing a second longer. None of your feelings or things can stay. So how can they then be yours? And that's basically beginning to acknowledge death, as in the distraction that is an impending upon the body, upon the senses. Decay, fading away, disintegration. You think about that, you're going to be less and less intoxicated with things that come through it, with your sight, sound, smell, taste, touches, thoughts. Why? Because you recognize, well, whatever they are, they cannot step outside of the confinement of the necessary basis of this living body. Same. Am I breathing? Yes. While I'm breathing, what position the body is in? It's seated. That seated body, while I'm breathing in and out right now, what are its characteristics? Just describe it in any terms to yourself. The most obvious one is it's just there, isn't it? It's living, it's just there. Do you have say in any of those characteristics? Can you change them? Can you tell them to be otherwise? So while I'm breathing, and my body is seated while I'm breathing, that body that I'm discerning while I'm breathing, in and out, while the breathing is there, that body that I'm discerning through it, it's independent of me, isn't it? I can use it, but I cannot uphold it. I cannot step outside of it and own it. I cannot tell it what to do. So it's only borrowed, which means everything else that you get through that body is equally borrowed. And if something is borrowed, is it the right thing for me to regard it as mine and belonging to me? No. If something is borrowed, is it the right thing for me to grieve and be sad over it being taken away? No. You require active ignoring of the fact that you are not in control in order to grieve over it or be happy over it. Hence, mindfulness done rightly results in discernment of the natural principles, which is what Dhamma is, nature. Nature of things. You could see how different that is from watching your nostrils, belly bhavana, whatever they call it. Completely different. Like I'm doing this. I'm feeling my belly rising and falling, rising and falling, rising and falling. Zero discernment there. You're just trying to attend the momentary presence of things, hoping that somehow magically it will result in knowledge. Looking for meaning results in knowledge. Delving with the knife, self-questioning, self-interrogation, all the things the Buddha talks about in the suttas, that's what results in the knowledge.
What about watching someone die?
Well, with the right attitude, sure, but not without the right attitude. Yeah. Watching someone die and then seeing that your body, your living body right here, right now, is on the level, it's morally related. It's more related to that dying body than to your sense of ownership of that body. It's in the same domain as the other dying bodies, not in the domain of you and this is my body. That's how you undermine your control, your sense of control. You can't directly choose to not control it or not own it, but you can undermine it. Hence, seeing that body is impermanent, because of that body cannot be the reason for lasting satisfaction, automatically you experience that body as not mine. Sabe sankara anicca, sabe sankara dukkha, sabe dhamma anatta.
So in independent origination it says, with birth, aging and death is. So with this life, this manifestation of life, and that's what I see as a whole. All that is determined by, or is subject to fading away, subject to ending.
Yes, yeah. But that doesn't need to be your subject, or you don't need to be subjected to it. You are subjected to it because you have appropriated. You appropriated birth, you appropriated given body, you appropriated possibilities of the given body in the senses. You appropriated it by delighting in it, by pursuing pleasures that are secondary to it, they come on the basis of it. You can't engage in sensual pleasure without appropriation of the body. It's inconceivable. So through engaging in sensual pleasure, you're responsible for your appropriation of the body. And then you are liable to whatever that body is liable to. Accidents, aging, death, sickness, all of it. Hence it's on you. Because you took it through carelessly pursuing sensuality.
The body will always age and will always die.
Yeah. You stop regarding it as yours, it's not your problem. In as much these aging trees and other people's bodies are not your problem, because they are not yours. That's why they're not your problem. It's not that they're not your problem because they're other people's. They're not your problem because other people you never considered to be yours. But, incidentally, say if it's your son, your daughter, your partner, suddenly you are emotionally affected. Why? Because it's mine. So yeah, you can appropriate other people as well. My friend. And that's why you suffer. Not because they're dying. You suffer because you appropriated them and now you're feeling that because you're liable to it. So you have a choice. If you want to be free from suffering, you have to give up all the appropriation. If you don't want to give appropriation, that's absolutely fine, but then you make yourself liable to suffering. But then, again, there is a contradiction, slight contradiction in that thing, because if you were then to be honest with yourself and ask, why don't I want to give up all the appropriations? Oh, it's because it's unpleasant. So you're still governed by the same principle of wanting to avoid suffering. Hence, that's why people protect their attachments and appropriations, because they don't want to suffer. Ironically, you suffer because of them. So if you were to take the initial hit of suffering, ultimately you can free yourself from suffering. But if you are too weak to take the initial hit of suffering, you make yourself liable to suffering indefinitely. Either way, everybody doesn't want to suffer. Even people who say, I want to suffer, they don't. They want to suffer because that provides them pleasure, because not getting that pleasure means suffering. That's why the Buddha himself could have not taught anything different than suffering and cessation of it. Because that is at the root of universally, in every human, regardless of the culture, education, identity and whatnot. That is always the basic principle. Avoid pleasure, avoid pain, have pleasure. Not having enough pleasure or getting more pleasure means avoiding pain of not having enough pleasure.
And what do you think about the common idea? Well, a lot of people can say, I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of death.
Yeah, well, they're not afraid of what they think death is. Which means they don't know what death is. Because only two people are not afraid of death. Either fully enlightened Arahant or fully deluded Putujana. But one of them is fully liable to death, another one is fully free from it. But they both are not afraid of it. One is not afraid due to the sheer amount of ignorance and not even knowing what death is. Another one is not afraid because he's completely overcome it. So, unless you are an Arahant, you are afraid of death. And if you don't feel the fear, it's because you're covering it up. Don't think that death is where you think death is. Think that death is basically where you can't get your pleasures, when you can't get usage of your senses. Well, find the fears you have in your life and death is at the other end of them. Whatever those fears particularly might be, or whichever particular way they might have to manifest. Whatever brings people anxiety, death is on the other side of that. So if you're saying, oh, I'm not afraid of that, that brings me no anxiety, yeah, because your idea of what death is completely wrong. But something will be bringing you anxiety, and that's where the death is.
So,
hence the anxiety.
Okay, so I'm afraid of losing all my friends.
Here you go.
You're saying death.
Death is at the other end of that.
Having
That's just a hint of where death is. Oh, not having anyone. Being all alone. Losing it all. Or simply losing things that are dear to me. Or even more simply, as the Buddha said, being disjoined from the agreeable. Being separated from the agreeable. Being united with disagreeable. That's what suffering is. And ultimate suffering is death. Well, I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of what people think about me. There you go. Death is basically not having say in what people will think about you ultimately. Oh, that's the most frightening thing, isn't it? Well, for those who fear that. Or, I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of losing my wealth. I'm afraid of losing my family.
I'm afraid of public speaking.
I'm afraid of public speaking. Why is that? Because literally, it's the ultimate experience of non-control. You have control over your speaking, but you have zero control of how people will take that. What will they say? What will they think? So ultimately, what is then fear of death? It's fear of the ultimate non-control. And it's not incidental that one thing or the other will have to be reminding you of that. Because the whole human experience is about covering the fact that you are not in control. Covering the fact that you are liable to dying. As in inevitably liable to dying. So all these things, loss and public speech, whatever frightens people, frightens them because it's the ultimate reminder of the ultimate cessation of their any notion of control they might have. So when people say I'm not afraid of dying, it's because that thought is in their control. And they said that's what dying is. So they're not afraid of it. Everybody dies. Yeah. But why are you afraid of public speaking? Everybody does speaking. Everybody speaks. Yet here you are terrified of public speaking. Why? Because you constantly are looking away from the fact that you are not in control. And when you encounter experiences that you cannot ignore the fact that you're not in control, it frightens the hell out of you. And that's what death is. The ultimate cessation of any ground for your notion of control that yet you take to be the most fundamental thing. I am, therefore things are mine, therefore I'm in control.
So anatta is basically seeing.
Yeah, anatta is seeing death, sure. Seeing death correctly means not being able to entertain the notion of control, means not being my own self, not being myself, not belonging to me, not appropriation. That's all anatta.
So if I see that for myself, and then
it's going to scare the hell out of you.
Yes, no, sure.
That's what happened in the suttas, didn't it? So if today people are not scared when they read about anatta and Nibbana, it's because they don't have a clue what it is, what it really is. So for Putujana, Nibbana is closer to what death is, the one that he is ignoring. So through Putujana, through ignoring death, actually ignores possibility of Nibbana. That's why those people who came to the Buddha, the way the Buddha would lay it out on them, they couldn't ignore it and they would fall on the ground in complete anxious despair, have a mental breakdown, saying this will kill me, this will destroy me. Yeah, because they still don't relinquish that. They still gratuitously assume the priority of their sense of I am, despite the evidence showing the contrary. So, but I'm not giving up I am, thus I will be destroyed. But if you hear the teaching, you realize that could have not been yours even if you wanted it to. And the only reason you're regarding it as yours is because you didn't know that it cannot be yours. And how do you find out that it cannot be yours? Through practicing mindfulness correctly and seeing it inseparable from the necessary basis of things that cannot be yours. So dwelling on the characteristics of the necessity of the body, dwelling on the characteristic of necessity of breathing, dwelling on the independence of the present enduring feeling, present enduring perceptions, yet seeing yourself inseparable from it. Means basically remolding, reshaping, going against the grain, and forcing yourself to see that your own very self depends upon the basis that cannot be yourself. Because if it were so, the body would not age, would not get sick, it would not die. If it were so, the feelings would not change, it would always be pleasant the way you want it to. But yet the Buddha said, well, if that feeling is yours, which one is it? Why do you then experience displeasure if feeling is yours? You wouldn't if you're in control. So through reminding yourself that you're not in control, through practicing the Marananusati correctly, you get to undermine your sense of self gradually and gradually and gradually. So you won't freak out and have a breakdown, although some monks did. That's why the Buddha said, well, do mindfulness of breathing instead. Because if done rightly, it will result in the same principles being discerned.
Then if you're truly unafraid of death, how would you take other people's death?
Equally unafraid of it. You will not be oblivious to what's happening, like some sort of robot who lost significance of things. No, still your friend dying. But no amount of the extent of that experience, perception and feeling in regard to it can sort of overturn your mind and make you think it's yours that which it isn't. Or that it's permanent that which it isn't. The only attitude you could possibly have is, how could it be otherwise?
No surprise.
How can something that's been born and grown not die? It's just like, it's actually insanity to think that, to think otherwise. So grieving over death, it's on the level of insanity, because it's the most, it's inconceivable for somebody who understood the nature of death to think, yeah, but if only, it doesn't apply. How can it be otherwise?
But you have to get used to this, if you can't start doing this while I think it'd be difficult while you're dying or while you...
Oh, good luck with that. If you haven't done it while you were alive, if you haven't uncovered up the nature of death while you were alive, you're not going to do it when you're dying. It's too late. So you want to start facing it as soon as you can. That's why, basically, understanding of death, understanding of the ultimate non-control, means ultimately giving things up, relinquishing appropriation, relinquishing assumption. That's why understanding of that fully means Nibbana. That's why Sotapanna, who understood the nature of Nibbana, or Arya Savaka in general, often he said in Sutta, if he doesn't attain it during the life, he attains it when he is dying. Why? Because that's where it comes from. Comes from the direction of dying and cessation of control, his understanding. Now he got careless and lazy during the lifetime, he hasn't been making effort, but death will force him in the direction that he already understood. So that's why sometimes somebody can become an arahant who had the right view at the moment of dying. It's not some mystical light that appears before you die. It's the direction you understood through your right view and everything else, and now you're forced, now you're dragged there. And you already understood it, so you're dragged there where you should have gone while you were still alive. But it's still good to understand it. But it's even better to do it and not wait to be dragged there. Even for Arya Savakas. So are you still breathing now? I'm asking you, are you breathing now?
Yes.
So is the experience of the breathing still the same experience of the breathing?
As far as I can tell,
yeah,
it's the same.
How can it be otherwise, unless you get another body?
Mm-hmm.
So while you're breathing right here, and while we're talking while you're breathing, what's your mood? How are you feeling overall?
Yeah, overall, okay. Could be better, I suppose.
Could be better while you're breathing in and out. What's the pace of your breath that you discern being done while you're breathing?
Yeah,
shallow,
bit restricted.
bit restricted.
Yeah.
All those things basically are just maintaining the mindfulness of breathing, like keeping you sort of all these questions.
Yeah.
But if you do it properly, long enough, you can stop asking questions because you already know. So then we'll come down to the breathing in is being done shallowly and breathing in, shallowly and breathing out.
While sitting.
Oh, what's the experience of what feelings am I experiencing while I'm breathing shallowly in and out? Again, you're not doing it or finding the answer. You're just discerning what's already there. Why? Because the feeling is already there. The body is already there. The mind is already there. The thoughts are already there. Now you're just discerning them through the basis of act of breathing. And why is that a good thing? Because usually you discern these things or experience this through the basis of my sense of self. But now you're doing through the basis that it's not your sense of self. So it makes you understand eventually that your sense of self is completely redundant, whether you choose to do things or not. And that's what I said. That feeling that's discerned while doing mindfulness of breathing is feeling among feelings, and it develops mindfulness of feelings. Or that's a body among bodies. As in your thoughts of your body position while you're breathing, it's basically where your body is there. So seeing it in that non-appropriated sense, because you're discerning it on the level of non-appropriated breathing. But if you just, my body's seated, I'm seated, that's like you already lost any right principle of mindfulness and you've fully appropriated it.
It's just basically
Because you're discerning your body being seated.
Mm-hmm.
You're discerning you, like while you're breathing, I'm seated. While I'm breathing in deep, slow breaths, I am seated, but I have intention of getting up. You're not doing it, you're discerning it. That's the difference between done rightly and done wrongly, the direction. Whether you're doing it, or whether you're actually not doing it, but discerning it, what's being done. Whether you're establishing upon your sense of self, as in doing it as a method and a technique, or you're undermining your sense of self as seeing it's done independently of me, including the present enduring feeling, the intentions, the thoughts, you discern them, which means they're already there. Whether you want them or not makes no difference. And it's that, developing clarity in regard to that. Oh, whether I want it or not, this is arisen. Because of that, it's impermanent. Everything I want or not is secondary to it. Thus, you stop and you lose that gratuitous priority that's assumed to me doing it, me wanting in my sense of self. And you don't have to, I'm breathing. Like, no, again, I'm still breathing. It's the same breath that you had 5 minutes ago when I asked you the question. The same experience of breathing. Many different in and out breaths, but they individually are not your concern. Your concern is overall experience of breathing, that you're still mindful as a basis. That's it. So through that you can discern further or not. It's up to you. But not build further or not through some technique or method or step 1, step 2. But discern what's already there. Or like, again, ask yourself a question. So, am I breathing right here, right now, while I'm seated in this room? You don't even have to say yes, because you already know you are, because you're thinking about it now. What are the characteristics of that experience of breathing? Don't rush to give the answer. Ask the question, and then allow your mind to endure it without jumping at the first answer that pleases you. So what's the characteristic of your overall experience of breathing? How would you describe it? No right answer, no wrong answers. How would you describe it? You let that endure. Can you be breathing without the notion of the body implicit in it? Impossible, inconceivable.
It's an active thing.
It's an active thing, sure.
It's being done.
So it's done on the basis of the body. So what is more necessary for the breathing? Presence of the living body and working lungs? or you thinking about it? You doing it. Which is more fundamental? It's the functioning lungs and open airways, basically. It's a necessary condition for my breathing. Can I be alive if I don't breathe? Consequently, can I be alive if my airways get blocked or lungs collapse and stop working? Can I tell my lungs to not stop working? Can I command them to behave? Do I even know how they work? Well, I have some idea, theory from biology and medicine, but it just happens to me, basically. Dwelling on all these characteristics while you're breathing means just discerning, just keep hammering it in, basically, that you can't own things even if you want, because even your sense of ownership is because things are given there on their own, independent of you. So you realize, by ignoring the fact that things are given independent of you, my lungs, my airways, the breathing, the body, that's how you assume the ownership. That's why you either own or you either free yourself from ownership. You can't have a view on both. Oh, this is the ownership, this is the non-ownership, so I choose this. That will require you to step outside of your experience, which is inconceivable. So you just have to keep dwelling on the nature of the very breathing you're doing right here, right now, and you're developing the nature of non-control, the nature of impermanence, the nature of fundamental unsatisfactory experience, because that kind of pleasure we get from things is underlined by the sense of control and joy and accomplishment. But you realize that's undermined by the fact that your body is not yours, senses are not yours. No pleasure that comes to your senses can be yours. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, you can. But it's a big price to pay for enjoying it. Death and deadly suffering. Trap. Through enjoying the pleasures of your eye, your head gets chopped off when that eye disappears. When it fades away. Or even when you just are losing your sight a bit, growing old. And same goes for any sense. All that we talk about, can be apparent if you know what questions to ask rightly, not jump and answer, and actually look at the discerning aspect of it. Just within you sitting here, breathing in shallowly. Feeling. Let's think about a feeling while I'm breathing in. So I'm still breathing in. I'm saying it because it's for the camera really, but you don't have to say it to yourself. But ask yourself internally, am I breathing in? Even before you answer it, you already know you're breathing in. So while you're breathing in, what feeling is enduring there? Whatever it is, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, doesn't matter. Don't try to define it, just see which category would fit most accurately. Pleasant, I suppose. So what would be the characteristics of that pleasant feeling discerned on the basis of me breathing right here, right now? See, I'm still breathing. I can even choose to breathe in long and slow, deep and shallow, whatever. I can choose. The background, how am I feeling while I'm doing all of that? It's pleasant. So what would be the characteristic of that pleasant feeling? Well, I discerned it as already being there. Something is already there. Means you haven't created it, haven't you? You just found it. So would it be a right thing for you then to act upon that feeling, to want to prolong it, to want to make it get rid of it? No, that becomes inconceivable actually. It's not a matter of choice. So through not being aware of the right nature, correct nature of the feeling, you want to get rid of it or prolong it or distract yourself from it. Through being aware of the right nature of that feeling, all these things become inconceivable. It's either or. You can't be aware of the both and then make your choice. As in, I see this and I'm choosing to not do it. Means you're not seeing it rightly. Hence it's either anuloma or patiloma. As the Buddha says, it's either with the grain of your senses, of your craving of the avijja, or it's against it. That's where restraint is absolutely necessary basis. Virtue. Because no amount of your discernment, if your body and speech are not restrained and are still going with the grain, you are maintaining the principle of ownership through that grain.
It reminds me of that sutta which says, see as though blind, as though you were already blind. I think that's what kind of
Right, well, see as though you already relinquished your sight.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what it means. Doesn't mean like pretend you're blind and you're not seeing, because what you're seeing was never the problem. It was you owning your eyes and what it can come through them, that you were affected with everything else that's experienced on account of it. So if you learn to, if you don't forget the necessary basis for any sight you have are the physical organs of your eyes that you're not in control, they will ultimately diminish and be destroyed. You cannot possibly then assume gratuitously have desire towards anything you see. The necessary basis for the desire towards sights is losing the sight, no pun intended, losing the perspective on the nature of the eye that's necessary basis for any sights. So ultimately you're going to be blind when you die. You will be deaf when you die. So seeing the ultimate result, death, in regard to your senses, will make you overcome anything that comes through your senses. But it doesn't mean like you're pretending you're not seeing, or you're pretending, which is what that wrong view said, that the man who was doing the Buddha said, oh, I'm acting like I'm blind and deaf, as if I'm ignoring sights and sounds. I'm pretending I'm not seeing and not hearing. And then the Buddha said, well, you're no better than a blind and a deaf man. Yeah, that's something different. That's when people blame the sights and sounds and any other senses for their suffering, failing to see that suffering is applicable to them because they appropriated the ownership of the senses, not because of what comes through them. So are you still breathing while we're discussing this particular approach of senses and eyes and blindness and deafness? Yeah, still the same breath, still the same basis for your mindfulness, enduring for like an hour now. So we've been doing mindfulness of breathing all this time and discerning the Dhamma within it on the terms of the universal principles, not on your own terms, or as accurately as you could do, whichever way you start. That's why like you look at the signs and characteristics, features of this thing. He doesn't like jump at the answers that his mind provides. Am I breathing? Yes. What would be the characteristics of this breathing? Characteristics, not like mechanical description, my lungs are moving or whatever. That's irrelevant. What is the nature of this act of breathing? Can I stop it when I want to? Well, only relatively so. Can I make sure it never goes away? No, not really. Do I have a say in that which is necessary for the act of breathing? The breathing apparatus? Not the closest. If an accident were to happen, a bacteria or virus to attack these organs, would I still be able to breathe as freely? No. So I'm taking for granted that it will be forever, that it will be in my control, that it will be unobstructed. Why am I taking it for granted? Oh, because I'm not thinking sufficiently enough that I cannot take it for granted. That's it. What is the condition for ignorance? It's ignoring, basically. You stop ignoring, you stop conditioning your ignorance. Stop ignoring certain universal truths, that's it.